All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome on this Martin Luther King holiday. Delighted to have you with us this morning. My name is David Severance. As many of you know me. For those of you who don't, I'm one of the coaches here at Chirag Shah Coaching, and I do programs pretty much on Fridays. Delighted to be here with everybody this morning. Today being Martin Luther King, we're going to use Martin Luther King as an inspiration for a conversation about how we can become better at leading ourselves and those around us to create the outcomes that are important to us in our lives. Many of us see Martin Luther King as a civil rights leader, which he absolutely was, of course, but we don't always think about how we can translate how he led himself and how he influenced those around him, translated into today's world, our business, the people that we work with, that kind of thing. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take a look at the way that he led himself and those around him. And we're going to talk about how we can apply some of those principles to our work to make your business more successful, make more money. I'd like to say one thing. While the topic here is leadership, I'd like to just invite everyone to think about what your particular role is in your business. If you're the leader of a team and you're kind of the positional leader of your team, you might say, okay, yeah, I'm interested in hearing what we have to talk about today. But if you're an independent person, you might say, well, how does this relate to me? I'm not a leader. What I'd like to say to everybody is whether you lead a team or you lead yourself, no matter what, you are leading yourself every day. And in addition to that, your success in your business is a reflection of how well you relate with others. Your clients, obviously, vendors you work with, the folks at Compass. The way that you inspire, the way that you influence is absolutely central to the success that you're going to enjoy in your business. So leadership is all about relationship. And so while Martin Luther King may be a different person from a slightly different time, his ability to influence literally millions of people holds opportunities for our own learning. I'd like to ask you, how many of you were able to inspire and motivate millions of people in your life by the time you were 38 years old? Because that's how old he was when he died. And so there was something that he did well that impacted others, that moved others. And we want to think about what some of those things are and talk about them today. So before we get started, last thing I want to say is I'll share my screen here. And last thing I want to say is we have a common conception in how we view leadership typically. All right, can you see the slides? Okay, whoops, how do we get back there? Let me reshare this, excuse me. Let's try that again. Okay, great. Well, there's a common misconception about leadership, and that is that leadership is about positional authority. When we think of people that we think about as leaders, we're usually talking about someone who has a position of authority in relationship to others. That's why we might think, okay, I lead a team, therefore I'm a leader, or I don't lead a team, therefore I'm not a leader. But if we have to think about that particular definition of leadership, if we're tying leadership fundamentally to this concept of positional authority, then by definition, anyone with great positional authority must be a great leader. By definition, that's our definition. Every team leader, every governor, every president, every CEO of every organization, by that definition, is a great leader. And we know that's simply not true. Conversely, if we tie a leadership to position, then those without great position also could not be great leaders, again, by definition. And we know that's not true either. People like Martin Luther King or Gandhi, or you think of people today like Malala Yousafzai or Greta Thunberg. These are people coming out of the masses. These are people that are not elected to high office. They don't control zillion-dollar budgets. They're just people who are using their own personal force, their own personal ability to impact others to create the outcomes that they're looking for. And so that's why it's important for all of us to recognize we all have the opportunity to impact others around us. And so if you're not leading a team of people, recognize still that your team, the people that you need to influence, are your clients, the vendors, and the folks at Compass. These are the people that are part of your team, even if you don't think of yourself as an intact team. If you don't think of them as internal, still they're external. So let's take a look at Martin Luther King's leadership. We've chosen 3 things here that were central to his leadership. We'll talk about them for just a minute, and then we're going to spend time focusing on each of these 3 to think about how you can apply this successfully in your business. Vision, values, courage. Vision. We define vision as a clear and compelling picture or image of the future you seek to create. a clear or compelling picture or image of the future you seek to create. One of the most famous images or ideas about the future visions for the future was when John F. Kennedy said, "We will put a man on the moon and bring him safely back to Earth by the end of this decade." That was a clear and compelling image which motivated millions of people to become interested in and support all the work that NASA was doing. Similarly, Martin Luther King had a vision for what American day-to-day life and relationships could be like. And of course, he talked about it, he wrote about it, he demonstrated for it. But the point we want to make here is we need to be clear about where it is we're going. Let me ask a question. How many of you have some kind of goal specifically in your yearly plan for this year that's not numerical? Something in addition to a numerical goal. Maybe your goal is to sell 10 more houses. Maybe your goal is to set, hit X dollars. I'd like you to put into the chat box anything that you have clearly as a goal or intention for your team that is not a numerical goal. Rachel, would you kindly read off whatever we get there?
Absolutely. So Marion wants to be more innovative. Kathy
Okay.
wants to list more homes. Jody wants to simplify. Marlena wants to be of service.
Okay, those are all good things. They're a little vague. More innovative, be of service. Okay, those are good things. Can we bring more definition to those things? That's not as clear as saying we will put a man on the moon and bring him back to Earth by the end of this decade. That's a pretty clear vision that we can all
How
pop
about
into
this
our head.
one?
Pardon?
Heidi wants to develop a campaign to lead a food drive.
Okay, that's much more specific. Develop a campaign for a food drive. Fine, that's fairly specific.
And
The reason we mentioned, pardon, go ahead, yeah.
Corey wants to follow up on all leads, where they went and which panned out and from where.
Okay, got it. The reason we ask you to do this is if you're having trouble thinking about it, I'd like to remind you of a quote by Dennis Waitley. Dennis Waitley said, "The reason most people never achieve their vision is because they haven't defined it, or they don't seriously believe that it's believable or achievable. Winners can tell you where they're going, what they'll be doing, winners will tell you what they're doing, what they're going to be doing along the way, and who will be sharing the adventure with them." And so he's challenging us to get much more clear about what it is we're intending to do here. It doesn't help us enough to say, I want to be better, I want to be bigger. We need to get much clearer than that. Let me share a couple of things from Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. 1963, he went to Washington. You probably heard about this, a big historic event. And he spoke a lot about vision. His dream for America was laid out in that particular speech. And here's a couple of things that he said during that speech. "I have a dream that one day, right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." Here he's saying very specific things that we can imagine clearly in our mind what those things might look like. He's revealing the depth of some of his thinking around this idea of, let's call it, freedom and justice. It's not enough to say we want more freedom and justice in America. You don't influence enough people powerfully enough by just going there. You need to go further than that. And so one piece that we need to think about here as leaders, whether we're individuals or we're head of a team, is how clear is our vision and is it compelling to anyone else? And we're going to talk more about that in just a couple of minutes. Second point for Martin Luther King here, values. Martin Luther King delineated a lot of values throughout his life about how he felt he should lead himself and how everyone should lead themselves within the struggle that he was engaged in. And here's another quote from that same I Have a Dream speech. Listen to what he's delineating here as a perspective on what matters, right? We usually see values as what matters most or what's important or principles to live by. And in this speech, he lays out several values that he's saying to everyone, these are the important ones we need to live by. He said, "In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. And so he's laying out for us what the world looks like from his point of view, the things that he values: dignity, discipline, and the opposite of bitterness and hatred. Of course, love was a very important word for him and a very important concept for him. And he famously said, "I choose love because hatred is a heavier burden to carry." And so all of these comments reveal a depth of thought and clarity in his own mind about where he was headed and how it was important for him to get there, or how he would get there in a way that was the right way for him to get there. And of course, others have taken other tacks. I'm not saying that that's the only way to get there. The point here is he was clear and he lived his values. You never saw him running around with a bat in his hand. You never saw him shooting people. He advocated peaceful, solid, never-ending resistance from beginning to end. Those principles that shaped what he was doing were steady all the way through. And for us as leaders, it's crucial for us to develop the principles, the ideas, the concepts that are most important for us, and to be able to demonstrate them consistently so that other people know who we are. And those who are interested in what we do and how we do it and along the lines of values will be attracted to us. Those who don't, that's fine, they can go somewhere else. But you need to stand for something. I can challenge you by asking, how do you show up in your relationships? What's most important for you when you show up in a relationship? What do you bring with you? Many of you may have values listed on your website somewhere. And I can tell you, when I look at people's websites, I see a lot of named values and then very fuzzy thinking. Somebody might say, well, I'm all about integrity and accountability. But then they don't talk about what that means. They don't talk about how they define those words. They don't talk about how they live those words. And chances are they don't even think of those words. Let me ask you guys to put into the chat box again. Without looking at any of your branding material, whatever it is, are you able to write down on a piece of paper right now all of the values that are listed and highlighted on your branding? Please put yes or no on the chat box.
Got a lot of no's, David. Except B. B said yes.
Got a lot of no's.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So we get a lot of no's when we do this work. We work with a lot of teams to help them really clarify what their values are. I'll talk more about it in a minute. But think about it. If your values are the concepts that are the core of who you are, the things that are most important to you, the things that you are saying to others, I stand for this. And then I ask you, are you able to even name what those things are? And you say no. Where are you? So we'll talk more about values in just a minute. Finally, courage. Courage goes without saying. Martin Luther King literally lived his life as if his life was at stake for making something happen. He faced risk every day. I'm not asking anybody to put their life at stake for anything, but we have to examine what our relationship with risk or fear is. Do we spend time thinking about what we fear? Do we spend time facing what it is that makes us the most nervous or anxious or uncomfortable? Do we ever have moments where we discuss our vulnerability with anyone else? Because other people who look at us and experience us, they experience something about our relationship with risk and our response, which is some level of courage in facing whatever those risks are. And the research shows that the more that you show vulnerability in general, the more that you show vulnerability, the stronger relationships you develop, the more trustworthy and authentic you're perceived as others. So I don't know if you ever have any conversations with anyone on your team or any folks that you work closely with about what you're concerned about, where your worry is, something that's a real problem for you and you just don't know how to solve it. Maybe you think you need to come off as the person who always has the answers to your client or to someone else. But the research clearly shows that when you share not only what it is you're sure about that's good and positive, but what it is that you're thinking about that you don't have an answer for, or some kind of vulnerability that you might have, you build relationship. So these are three things that were part and parcel of Martin Luther King's leadership and his ability to influence those around him. Let's see how we can apply all three of these to your work to help you be more consistent, more effective, earn more money. Let's first talk about vision. As I said before, we define vision as a clear and compelling picture or image of the future you seek to create. And as I asked you before, how many of you have some clarity around things other than a specific numerical target? And some do, some don't. That's fine. Think about this. In crafting your vision for this year for the business, it probably includes a lot more than simply financial things. But have you sat down to think about, in achieving those financial goals that are of interest to me, have I identified the who, the what, the when, the where, and the how? Or is it just, I want to hit it and somehow we'll get there? Articulating a vision to someone else is extremely important for getting their buy-in. And in order to do that, you need to know clearly what it is first. Remember that Dennis Waitley quote that I talked about a minute ago. Winners can not only tell you where they're going, but what they'll be doing and who will be sharing the adventure with them along the way. So there's a lot of work that we can do here to get clearer about who's involved, what they'll be doing, when they'll be doing it, how they'll be doing it. So here's one particular exercise that you can do. Sit down with a blank piece of paper, write your goal across the top of the paper, whatever goal is that you've adopted in your yearly plan. See if you can put a what, when, where, who, and what, and how underneath that particular goal. See where the gaps are and spend a little time thinking about what's missing. And it may be that you don't need to include everybody in that particular goal. That's fine. It doesn't mean that everyone will have some kind of a crucial role to play in that particular goal. But you need to be clear in your own mind. Otherwise, it's more wishful thinking than it really is a plan or a vision. Second, practice in order to be able to articulate it well. No vision has power with anyone else unless it's shared. In order to make it clear and compelling, you need to understand what it is in your own voice. When Martin Luther King says, "I want my children to be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin," did you feel anything the first time you heard that? Did you say, wow, that's a thought that never occurred to me before? That's something. Martin Luther King came up with that because of a lot of reflection. And so it's up to you to come up with your particular way of saying whatever it is that you're passionate about here, that you're committed to here, that you want to make into a reality. It's not enough to just have it down on paper. Sooner or later, you need to share it with others and you need to articulate it effectively. Now, there's plenty of ways to practice this. You can get a practice buddy here within our community. You can work with someone who's in your office. Lots of folks that you can try it out on. Write it down on a piece of paper so you get your thoughts clear in your head. And then practice sharing what matters to you. Make sure that it includes whatever clarity you have about who, what, when, where, and how. And finally, don't forget about WIFM. Who knows what WIFM is? What's in it for me? As you share your particular vision for others, naturally, it's going to include others on your team. Naturally, it's going to include vendors. Naturally, it'll include the clients. Naturally, it'll include folks at Compass who may be part of your team in some way. Make sure that you're considering and crafting your vision in a way that has some kind of relevance to them and for them. This is how we make it compelling. A vision or a vision statement should be both clear and compelling. Clear comes from this first bullet point here, specific and clear. You figured it all out in your mind, or at least most of it. Making it compelling means it has to have some relevance or value to the others around you. It can't simply be your vision, right? Martin Luther King was never saying, follow my vision. He was saying, let's make this our vision. And indeed, in all leadership, every vision is about more than just the visionary. It's always about everyone who has a place in that. And so as you're thinking about your vision, try to think about a way that you can articulate it that creates space for the other people to be, a place for them in that particular vision. And if you can do that, you're well on your way to creating an ally in making that vision a reality. Next, values. Values are another key piece of how you can touch others, how you can move others. We all have values. We all live by some set of values. We don't always talk about values. We're not always clear about our values. Values are generally seen as the things that we think are most important, principles we want to live by, and important for your leadership, what others can count on you for. Your values are what others can count on you for. For example, Walmart. Everybody knows that you can count on Walmart for cheap stuff. If you want cheap stuff, you go to Walmart. That's what you get there. Everybody knows it. If you want speed, you go to Ferrari. If you want luxury, you go to Rolls-Royce. If you want reliability, you go to Toyota, right? These values are part and parcel of the identity of those particular organizations. And so when you say what other people can count on you for, you've projected an image so clearly that people who are expecting or wanting that particular thing come to you for it. Now, when I asked you a few minutes ago, can you identify your own values? And many folks said, well, not really sure. The second point there is, have you defined your values? Even if you pick a word, integrity, innovation, accountability, knowledge, what do those things really mean to you? I can guarantee you, having done this with thousands of people, that nobody defines integrity exactly the same as anybody else. And you'd be surprised how differently people define these things. Here's an exercise you can do on your team if you have one, or even your key vendors. Take the 2 or 3 values that you think are most important to you and ask each of the people that are key to your work to simply write down on a blank piece of paper, how do they define each of those 2 or 3 values? And then collect all the pieces of paper and see what you have. I'm pretty sure that you're going to find out that however you see those words, other people see them a little differently. And if you've never had a conversation with them about this before, then guess what that means? That means you guys are coming at the same business from different points of view. What does high touch service mean? What does integrity really mean? If you're coming to clients with a different point of view on what these very fundamental words are, then absolutely their actions and behaviors are going to be different from yours because they reflect a different perspective on what those things are. And so it's important for you to define what those values mean to you. And then the second part here, discuss. You need to bring your values to the surface and have explicit discussion about them so that other people can share their input and you can come to some kind of alignment on what these things mean to you. You know, for those of us who've ever struggled in life over our relationship with a significant other, those struggles are really a reflection of different points of view of words like love, respect, support, those kinds of things that are part and parcel of a long-term intimate relationship with someone. We naturally see things different as different individuals. And when we have arguments, disagreements, divorces, all those things, fundamentally, it's because we have different points of view on those things. From a business point of view, it's much easier in that we only need to choose 2 to 4 values. We don't recommend more than 4 because it gets too hard for everyone to keep in their mind. But to bring everybody together around 2 to 4 values is doable. And we help teams do that all the time. And you can do it by starting with this conversation where you all write down your own definitions and see how far apart you are. Then you can take the next step to use what's there and think about if you want to amend your own personal definition as the leader of yourself and the leader of your team. If you want to amend the amend the definition in some way that makes sense, go ahead and do that. However, it still must be yours. You can't define something based on what everybody else says about it. You need to be clear in your own thinking. That's the discuss part. And this discuss part, it's not just about getting clear in the beginning, it's about discussing it regularly when you bring somebody new onto the team, when you have some kind of a retreat, when you're sitting back at the end of the year, you can review your values and you can say, did I really live these values this year? Was I really clear on how to live these values this year? How can I live these values better next year? You need to build time into your schedule from time to time to discuss with others what these things mean to the business. And finally, demonstrate. Demonstrate is all about how you live your values. I'll say to you that if you don't know what your values are and you can't define them, how can you demonstrate them consistently? We may have an idea that we're all about integrity or we're all about service or we're all about community, but what does that really look like in the real world? Some of us may say, well, it's good for me to sponsor some events in my town. That shows community. Okay, that's pretty good. Or some might say, I need to, make that extra phone call because service is what we're all about here. Okay, that's pretty good too. But you need to go into the work with a clear understanding of how to demonstrate those things from the beginning. You don't back into it by saying, well, here's something good I ought to do and it reflects X. It should be the other way around. It's here's X. This is what's important to the success of my business and the contribution that we want to make to those around us. And therefore, what does it look like in my work? What does it look like to me? And how can I communicate to others what it looks like to them? So one question about values here for the chat box. How many of you have ever had a conversation with your team about what specific values in your team, the stated values, how they translate into a specific set of actions and behaviors for that person in his or her role? Put a yes or a no in the chat box for that one.
David, we have a quick question in the chat box here.
Yeah,
Tracy wants to know, are we defining values based on who we are today or who or what we aspire to?
great question. Your values are what you stand for as a human being on this planet, the things that are true for you, that have always been true for you, and always will be true for you. Values, our true values, do not change over our life. You don't wake up 37 years old and say, you know what, that honesty thing I've been living by all these years, that's out the window now. I'm going to start robbing banks and cheating on my taxes. Right? It doesn't work that way. So what we're talking about is the things that are most important to you today and in the past and always will be there in the future. And how does that translate into your business? Sometimes what we value as an individual, it's a little bit hard for us to kind of move that into our business. But what we're saying is, if this is the most important part of who I am, and I can't find a way to bring that into my business, how am I bringing myself into my business? And so this is one of the reasons why most companies don't do a lot of good work with values, because it's hard. It's not easy. It takes some reflection. Sometimes it takes help from someone on the outside to stimulate your thinking. So absolutely the answer is the values that are true for you always have been and always will be. And that's how you bring your authentic self to your work. Now, what did we get in terms of yeses and nos, Rachel, on that question?
So we have 2 yeses, and Marion, thanks for your honesty. She says, not well. And then B says, we have discussed, but certainly need to do more work. Corey has not discussed it with her team.
Got it. So whoever is on your team, it's crucial for you to help them understand what the behaviors are in that role that reflect these particular values. And if you can do that with 2, 3, 4, 5 actions for each person, suddenly you've helped them greatly by helping them understand what they should be doing and maybe what they don't need to be doing. It's a huge, remember, clarifying values not only aligns us around a core philosophy about what's important, but it helps guide everyone's behavior because they know what's most desirable and what's less. All right, a couple more minutes left here. Let's just talk about this last one. Courage. We don't think about courage so much, but it's a crucial part of leadership. Martin Luther King obviously was highly courageous. All of us have a relationship with fear. All of us have a relationship with worry or anxiousness or concern. And part of our success involves having a relationship with the things that scare us in a way that still empowers us to go out and do what we need to do. To cower under a rock is not going to serve our goals. To perhaps get angry and scream and throw chairs against the wall perhaps is not an ideal, effective response to what it is we worry about. So it's kind of a lifelong challenge to develop our ability to be courageous in the face of what's difficult. But Eleanor Roosevelt famously said, you must do the thing. You must do, wait a minute, what you must do the thing. Oh yeah, you must do the thing that you think you cannot do. What she was saying was, the things that we think we cannot do are the ones that stop us in our tracks, and they're also the ones that sometimes are the most valuable things. And so for us to be able to do the things we think we cannot do, first it involves some steps to identify fears, concerns, and risks. You can do this easily by sitting down with a piece of paper and saying to yourself, what are the 3 things that concern me the most about my business this year? What are the 3 biggest risks that I have this year? What are the 3 biggest fears I have this year? And you could do it with the other people on your team and see what they say, and then have a great conversation about what those things are. Second, that's part 2, expressing vulnerability, to be able to have a conversation with the team. Remember, these people are almost as committed or maybe as committed to your success as you are, to be able to share honestly what it is you fear, and have them in on the conversation to provide support, to provide input, validates their role on your team. To simply say, I have all the answers, or to simply say, I need to figure out all the solutions, is to devalue everyone else's input and the fact that they're going to be part of it no matter what happens anyway. So to have a conversation from time to time about what concerns you about the business, not just what's going well, but what concerns you have and how you might address them, and inviting others into that conversation not only helps you find the best solutions, but other people perceive that as you being real, authentic, honest, and valuing their input. And finally, take prudent risks. If you ask yourself, what risks have I taken lately? Make a list and see how big they are. You may find that you haven't really taken any risks in a long time. But all success involves taking risk from time to time. Every leader, Martin Luther King and anybody else, takes risks. So if you sat down for 15 minutes and ask yourself, how many risks have I taken over the last year, the last 6 months, and name them and then rank them, get a sense of how big, small, or otherwise they are. And start to think about how you are choosing to take risk in your everyday decisions. Doesn't mean you need to take the biggest risks. We're not talking about that. We're talking about taking prudent risk. Prudent risk means understanding the risk, assessing the risk, and making whatever choice from time to time because it's the appropriate choice to make. That's what we talk about when we're saying prudent risks. That's what we're talking about. Okay, that's it for today, everybody. It's 10 o'clock. So grateful to have everybody with us. We welcome your input on anything with regarding leadership. Send us an email anytime. I look forward to seeing everybody again next Friday.
Thanks so much, everybody. We will see you tomorrow for Agent Talk with Fran Mazer, directly followed by your role-playing accountability. Excited to see you guys then. Have a good day.